America.
Small, lay a big hit and pass a kick the ball. This game is for us all. From Seattle down toward the Keys, this game is you, this game is me. Cats, dogs, and steer, even a tree. This game is America, so sing it loud with me. College football forever. College football forever. Downtown LA, Starkville City. 1 week you're up next, take a dip. Run the rock or let it rip. This game is America. All say, can you sing it with me?
We just stepped on her face with a hot-tail Logan broke her nose. Whoa, Nelly!
College football forever. College football forever. College football forever. College football forever.
College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
Oh, yes, the anthem of college football, the purveyor of which is the man you see on the right of your screen if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. If not, you could just imagine what JC Shurburtt looks like on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play. He is JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports. Mike Morgan with you here. We are glad to be back with you. We have missed you. It's our first show since the national championship game, and we have plenty of thoughts on that. We're also going to do this one old school. You know, we just saw was it Carrie Underwood did God Bless America a cappella because the music didn't work. We today are not able to do commercial breaks, so we are going straight through. We are marathon men. We are like, remember in the old days when people actually listened to music radio? I don't know if anybody still does that. All right, we got 100.9. We got a rock block, 45 minutes, commercial free. It's Weenie in the Butt here on 100.9. We're going.
What? Is that a band?
That's actually, you know where I got that from? That's from the Family Guy. They actually have like these two stereotypical DJs, you know, hey, everybody, the morning zoo, honk, honk. You know.
Right here, 102.5 FM.
102.5. We're going to get the wet out. 1 hour straight at Zeppelin. I miss those guys. chain
Hey, look,
smoking DJs.
Rock 101 and in the upstate of South Carolina, my dad listened to a lot of classic rock. And it's still there. And now there's bands I grew up listening to that were modern that are on that station. It makes me feel old, but they would do a block of Bob Seger. And
Yeah.
Block of Bob coming up for you. Block of Bob right here, Hollywood Nights. Bob Seger. I mean, it always reminds me of WKRP and Dr. Johnny Fever whenever I think of that. You know,
What a
in
show.
fact, I thought your reference may be from WKRP, but then I was like, I think the censors back then would have been a little bit you know, they're a little more lenient with Family Guy than they were with WKRP.
Yeah.
But,
You know what ultimately did that
was a-
show in WKRP? And I know you have to be of a certain age. I mean, maybe you've seen some of it in syndication, although it's hard to find. And I'll tell you why it's hard to find. And this is what ultimately did that show in. They played a lot. This will be certainly it'll hit home, JC, because you know the YouTube world and all the restrictions we have with music and everything else, and you get dinged if you play a licensed song, and you can't. It's a long story, but trust me, it's a thing. WKRP was playing actual hit songs on their show, and then they realized, okay, wait a minute, you don't have the publishing rights to that, so if you're going to keep doing that, or if we're going to run this show in syndication, you better get the checkbook open and pay us for those songs.
Wow.
Same reason why the Wonder Years for so long. How's a Little Help from My Friends, Joe Cocker? You can't watch that show and hear that. It's like a karaoke version of that. And you can't hear all those old 1960s, 70s classic songs because they're not licensed to play them. That's what did KRP in. The things you want to know, presented by JC and Morgan.
I could talk about this for a while.
I know. It's a sore spot. I know.
Well, it's another, having dove into it, if the money was right, you know, if you didn't have to pay through the nose to get licensed, I think everybody would win, and you would make money instead of no money, which a lot of artists now, you know, you can't get by on record sales anymore. So I think there's not a lot of common sense, but that's kind of like the college football playoff committee.
Oh, there we go. What a segue. Get us back on the tracks, everybody. Yeah. It is JC and Morgan, presented by MG&A Wealth. For all your family's financial needs, go to mgawealth.com. National championship game came and went. The first 12-team playoff ever came and went. Ohio State's somewhat destruction. I mean, it was 31-7. I know the game ended closer than that, but Ohio State's dominant playoff run came and went. Think about this, and I've said it many times going back to our last show. In the BCS, neither one of these teams would have been in the title game, and you folks would have been told, well, one played two, so clearly they got the best two teams, and you would have been forced to believe that for 20 years. Then in the 4-team playoff, you would have had 4 teams selected. And guess what? Ohio State would not have been one of them. Ohio State, they lost a close one to Oregon, time management, and they crapped the bed, pardon my French, at home against Michigan. So that would have done you in ordinarily. And I understand the defense for Ryan Day now and the love for Ryan Day now, and Kirk Herbstreit gets very emotional when talking about Ryan Day, and all that's fine and well. But I'm not convinced Ryan Day would not have been fired if we didn't have an expanded playoff and he was able to get his Buckeyes in. But give respect where it's due. Ohio State, in this run, beat number 1 Oregon by 20, number 3 Texas by 14, number 3 Penn State by 7, number 5 Notre Dame by 11, number 5 Indiana by 23, and number 7 Tennessee by 25 in a home game. That's a pretty dominant run. So it's going to be interesting to see how history treats this Ohio State team. I don't think it's a super team like 2019 LSU. You don't have a Joe Burrow. You had good quarterback play, but you don't have a Joe Burrow, and you don't have Jamar Chase on the outside and Jefferson on the other side. Like, that team was ridiculous. I don't even know if it's 2021, 2022 Georgia, where they're just stockpiling defensive lineman after defensive lineman. And Stetson Bennett, say what you will, I don't care if that guy throws a pass in the NFL. He was a really good college quarterback. But you cannot deny when Ohio State got in, they absolutely showed that they were the most talented team and played like it throughout the college football playoff. So kudos to the Buckeyes.
Yeah, look, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I said it off. They had a caged animal offseason. And it wasn't, I think there's a misconception out there that they spent $20 million and went in the portal and bought a team. Nah, I mean, you want to see buying a team, go look at Indiana. I mean, 20-something guys from James Madison will tell you that. I mean, there's portal-heavy teams out there. Ohio State took 6 or 7 guys, but they got some pieces in place with Judkins, with the safety from Alabama, with the quarterback who had played his best football in the playoff, refocused. They trusted it. It seemed like Chip Kelly trusted a lot more. And he was a big difference in that game. 17 for 21. He was named the MVP. Will Howard. But what they also did, spending money, Mike, was they retained a lot of guys that they had been recruiting and developing for a while that could have gone to the draft and been between 4th and 7th rounders. But they took care of them to come back. I think that mattered. I think that, when you talk about, it was hard to kind of figure out who number 1 was this year because Ohio State did lose a couple of games, and we're obsessed with pretty records, apparently. And, they lost at Oregon, and then the Michigan thing was a shock. They nearly got beat by Nebraska at home. Now, in that case, they would have probably been in the Outback Bowl, and Ryan Day could have been fired. You're right. I mean, you look at the resume. If they're sitting there at 10-2 and just like Peach Bowl, like a New Year's Six game or a playoff bowl game, and they have all these opt-outs, I mean, they're probably sitting with an interim coach, Larry Johnson or whoever it is, coaching in that bowl, and they're trying to hire somebody new.
Right.
That's just not it. You're right about that, I think, completely. Is it a good story that he overcame stuff? Yeah. Does it turn my stomach when I hear that he had to get security for himself and his family? How psychotic that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous. Whoever facilitated the need for that needs to be arrested and jailed. I mean, or in a mental institution. And I'm honest there. No, you can't find my home address on the internet. Anyway, too close to Ohio, man. But I respect him for all of that. I think at the end of the day, you had a team that caught fire at the right time, that had a lot of good players. I'll remind everyone, Ohio State has had good players. You just talked about Georgia in 2022. Remember what happened to TCU out in LA? Mm-hmm. Well, do we remember the stroke of midnight in the Peach Bowl that year? They escaped the Buckeyes in DJ Stroud. Mm-hmm. That's why I think we kind of came to the agreement when they were talking about who to take number 1 a couple of years ago. Was it Bryce Young? Was it Stroud? I think you and I both kind of, at the end, we went with Stroud because of that performance against what essentially is an NFL defense, and we're spot on with that. It's not like this is a new thing that Ohio State has a lot of good ball players. I mean, I think some people, because Ross B. York put out the $20 million number, which I wouldn't do that if I were an AD. That creates undue pressure on everybody. I think because of that, the assumption is they put this roster together just by hitting the portal and creating a, like you said, super team. They didn't. They got good pieces. Largely that was used for retention, though, and that doesn't get a lot of hype because everybody likes the new shiny thing. So you're looking at who you bring in from the portal rather than who you kept from going into the portal. Just boring, right? So fans don't pay attention to that, but they did a good job with that. I think at the end of the day, the Ohio State schedule, like you mentioned, they went through a lot of good teams, Mike. You ever heard me make a schedule argument against them? Ever. I thought when I broke down all the Big Ten schedules and performance and stuff like that, it's like, well, Ohio State and Oregon have actually played tough schedules. You know, there were some teams that got in that had played very few winning teams, much less playoff contenders or ranked teams. But I thought they were tested this year, regular season wise. And then in the playoff, you know, they didn't have the fortuitous bracket like Penn State. You know, Tennessee, good football team. You know, people were worried that they're going to run all over Ohio State. You know, it's tough to defend that offense. You know, Oregon ranked 1 most of the year and undefeated. They thumped them. Texas, talented football team. Notre Dame was on a heater, right? Really good football team. And so they deserve to win. And they're the first 2-loss national champion. So I think in some ways they're probably going to, when everybody likes to go rank who are the best national champions, I guarantee you they'll be at the bottom of some of those lists. And it's because I got a new term, pretty record syndrome, PRS. They got PRS because they're like, well, they lost 2 games, and then these guys won this. Yeah, they were the first 2-loss champion ever in the sport, and they I think maybe back in the day they had a 2-loss. Closest thing was Colorado. They had a loss and a tie. They won it.
Well, the LSU,
they were 14 and I forgot.
Yeah, LSU.
I'm sorry. First 2-loss champion that lost in regulation both times. How about that? Because both those LSU games were in overtime. But yeah, okay. I actually left the Les Miles National. How can I forget that? I
2007.
tweeted the other day. Yeah, I tweeted the other day on that note, and I somehow replaced Ed Orgeron's name with Urban Meyer's when I was talking about LSU coaches, because since 2000, Mike, the only 2 schools to have 3 different coaches win national championships, and really nobody else even has 2, Ohio State, LSU. How about that?
Yeah.
Everybody else has won a national title in that period has had 1 coach to do either one or all of them. So that says a lot about those programs.
It really does. And in this day and age of, and we'll get to the whole conference rhetoric and animus and debate and flexing and everything else. Ohio State has been an SEC program for a while, with SEC talent, with SEC facilities, with SEC passion, with SEC money. So if you're living in a world where the SEC is the best conference, and we all agree on that top to bottom, year in, year out, with few exceptions, yes. But if you're living in a world where you think nobody else is of the caliber of Georgia, Bama, LSU, etc., Texas, no. Ohio State has always had this. And Michigan pops up here and there, not as much as Ohio State has, but who knows if Harbaugh stayed, how many more could he have won? But Ohio State has every resource imaginable, and they have for a long, long time. And it's one of those where you have to screw it up coaching, hiring wise, to really keep them out of the mix. So this is not like some dark horse story. Like you said, 3 championships with 3 different coaches. What does that tell you? It's not the magical Nick Saban, pulling the strings on a dynasty. It's a program that should always be in contention, and more often than not is in contention. And my only prediction on the game itself was, I was on a couple shows and asked about it, and I'm sure you were as well. I just said, look, let me get beyond just, this matchup versus this offensive line versus this defensive line, and the outside linebacker. I just said the best athlete on the field is Jeremiah Smith. And consequently, I'm taking Ohio State. I don't care about the point spread. Didn't even know what it was until like the last second when I was told it went from, I think, 6.5 to 9.5 to 8.5, whatever. But they had the best athlete on the field, as you pointed out a number of times, a kid from Miami, which is part of the bigger point, which is Ohio State, which is a football-rich state in terms of high school talent. They've always been able to recruit nationally. So they don't just rely on Midwestern kids. I mean, you look at the Boza brothers, you look at they've always been able to go down south and get talented young men, and they did that again here recently. And then the portal, you mentioned Judkins. I mean, he's basically their number 2 running back. And Lane, who's been the ultimate poacher, he got poached. I mean, Ole Miss might have been in the playoff if they had Quinshon Judkins. I thought that was the weakness of their team. I didn't think they had a great running back. He showed out in the playoff. It was a big reason why they won it. So Ohio State's not going anywhere is the point. SEC or not, they are absolutely built to stay. And now you know that Ryan Day isn't going anywhere anytime soon either.
No, they'll be in the hunt almost every year. I mean, that, like you said, they have resources there, not just money. I mean, Ohio it's slipped behind Georgia as far as top talent producing states go, because it used to be a solid fourth. You had, Florida, Texas, California, and then Ohio was right there. And populations have shifted and Georgia's grown. There's more Georgia now when you're talking NFL players produced, Division I guys, all that good stuff. But it's close, and you look at the players from Ohio, Mike, that stock Big Ten rosters, that stock a whole conference in the MAC, and that conference is competitive on the 5 level. Lots of Ohio kids, tons of schools from Ohio, and that it's a big. I call it the breadbasket of the Big Ten. So they're and you're right. They hit South Florida as well as anybody. They get players now, Mike, out of South Florida like Miami used to get, and like Alabama did for a while. Alabama getting Amari Cooper, and Judy, and all those guys from South Florida. So they hats off. They won it, and they're preseason number 1 in ESPN's way too early rankings, and we'll see what kind of encore offseason they have in Columbus.
One last thing on the game itself, which by the way, the ratings were down, but the ratings, I mean, it's still like 22 million people. You can't put on any show on television that even comes close to that. So some people are just so damn negative about the playoff. They are finding anything they can to convince you a 12-team playoff is a bad idea. There's certainly fine tweaks that are going to happen. I don't know if playing it on a Monday night after 4 NFL playoff games is the best solution. I think there's dates, there's the seating is off. There's a number of things that are going to tweak, and that'll be done. I'm convinced of that. But I thoroughly enjoyed the playoff, and if you want less college football, I don't understand why. That's just we'll agree to disagree on that. But Marcus Freeman was named the Bear Bryant Coach of the Year, and kudos to him. I got to say this though: the one time that game got interesting was when Notre Dame cut it to 2 scores, a 16-point game with under 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. You've got 4th and goal at the 9. I don't know how you attempt a field goal there. I've heard different ways to try and justify it. To me, there's no justification. Like you basically waved the white flag at that moment. And I know they still had a chance even after the missed field goal, but I've seen so much of this. I see it in the NFL. Coaches that they go for 2 when you have no business going for 2, and you just scratch your head and go, "What the hell?" I mean, I saw Kirby Smart do that in a pivotal moment. They wound up winning the game, but it happened, and everybody's like, why did we just go for 2? That would have cut it to 9 instead of 10. And now there's just been a lot of that. And then there's a lot of time management. And if you're not calling plays, which most of these guys don't do anymore, you delegate everything to your coordinators. If you can't get that part of the game right, then you need to hire another coach, come up with like a former backup quarterback in the NFL whose job was to hold a clipboard and help in those situations. Wear the hat backwards, hold the clipboard. Hey, here's what we need to do here. Hey, by the way, you're going to want to use a timeout here and not take 2 to the locker room. There's way too much that goes on in college and the NFL. So kudos to Coach Freeman. Did an outstanding job. Coach of the Year. Great story. But as you're watching that, if you're a Notre Dame fan, you've got to be screaming at your TV set saying, why are we not going for it here? And they didn't.
I'm kind of on a different side of this. There were 9 minutes left. There was 9 minutes left.
Right.
And you're at the 9. You're not at the 3.
Correct.
And Mitch Jeter's been kicking well. I don't know if I missed that one. That was bad. If you make it, you're only down 13. So, if you score a touch, if the percentages are low that you're probably scoring from the 9, and it's even lower if you get the 2. If you don't get the 2, you're down 2 scores anyway. Now you're only down 10, so you need a field goal and a touchdown. What the 3 there did, Mike, in my opinion, I'm not like a strong opinion about this. There's 9 minutes remaining, and then you're on 13. That's 2 touchdowns and 2 extra points, and you win. And and so do you come away with no points, and it makes it even harder on yourself, which it did, because they ended up scoring and getting a 2-point conversion and making it 31-23, or do you take the points there? You don't have the pressure of going for 2. Following the path of logic there on both sides can be right. It's a judgment call. And I know I had to go through like 3 different steps to get there when, you kind of put it out very plainly. I get it, but it's, with 9 minutes left, it's a lot different than 6 to me. I think they had their timeout. So who knows? I mean, who knows what would have happened? The bad thing was the kid missed the 20
missed
chip
field
shot
goal. Right.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah, well, that's on him. I mean, and Jeter's more than a capable kicker. So I don't blame the coach for a field goal, a kicker missing what amounts to a chip shot. At the way that game was going, I didn't see, if you didn't cut it to 1 score there, I didn't see a chance to win. I didn't see a pathway because Ohio State's offense, as improved as that Notre Dame defense is, they're not there yet. And especially against that offense, which is almost impossible to defend. When they're clicking, they're almost impossible to defend. And I'll say this too, Notre Dame is definitely getting there. But when I watched that game, I started having deja vu to some of the Brian Kelly teams that made it to the BCS title game or the 14 playoff. And I looked at Ohio State's Jimmies and Joes, and I looked at Notre Dame's Jimmies and Joes, and I said, advantage Ohio State. They were clearly the more talented team.
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, they were better than everybody else in the whole country, but Notre Dame was lacking, and they there's no excuse there because they played through. They had some key injuries coming in, and I think after the first, which was nothing but like guts and heart and guts, Riley Leonard. And you looked at them and they were exhausted. And it's a 10-minute drive. That rarely happens. And I'm like, it took a whole lot of energy to get down the field on that defense. Right? Chunk, touchdown. And I was like, well, Ohio State's probably going to pick up a couple of first downs. And if you can stop them around midfield, let those get, it sounds crazy to say let your offense rest. Offense take on another long drive, then that's the formula to win the game, because you're keeping the offense off the field and tiring out, in theory, an Ohio State defense that's really, really good as well. Ohio State goes right down the field and scores. Then Notre Dame goes backwards on their next one. Next was third and 25 inside the 10, and you have to put that one. I was like, there's really little. I mean, that's it. Credit Notre Dame for coming back. I tend to think this Ohio State team, as good as they are, and not every team can win doing this because it's a bad habit. Flipped a switch a lot of times this year in games, flipped it on and off. So I think they went down into cruise control for a little while, and Notre Dame came back, and then Howard to Jeremiah Smith, 56 yards. That was put it on ice. Beautiful pass, beautiful reception. So
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah. He's a matchup nightmare. I mean, you got 2 more years of him. He can't go pro for 2 more years. So what NIL money package is he getting? And then to have to sit there and watch that kid when I'm the last one to say a guy is NFL ready when he's not NFL ready. I don't just drink that Kool-Aid every time. I don't know how much better or more equipped he can get for the NFL. He is, people talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. was not at the level of Jeremiah Smith. And you watch the rookie season in the NFL, and it played out that way. This kid's different. He just is.
Oh, freak, stud, whatever.
He's like one of the LSU guys.
I mean, yeah, and those guys went to the NFL and became. I mean, I think all of them are really good. But he's 2 more years, man. People are gonna have a hard time stopping him. You know what I'm saying? So he had a great year for sure, and is the number one. He'll be the number 1 receiver in college football for the next 2 years, unless he gets hurt or something like that. So he will be around for a while.
Credit Will Howard. He was great during that playoff run. 25-5. That is the record of teams leading at the half in the national championship game in the playoff era. 25-5. There hadn't been a whole lot of marvelous comebacks. And yes, there's been a number of blowouts, much like we've had a number of Super Bowls that are blowouts, a number of NFL playoff games that are blowouts. Folks, sometimes one team is just better than the other. Like, blowouts in football are as old as the sport. There was an NFL championship game between the Bears and the Redskins, going back to the George Halas days, JC. It was 73-0 in what was the Super Bowl before they called it the Super Bowl. And I was there. And let me tell you something. We walked up the hill in the snow. No, I wasn't there. I wasn't alive, but I'm an NFL films junkie, and I remember hearing about that game when I was a kid. The point is, like, and I wanted to just get your thoughts on this. You see it. It's people that we know and like, and people that we've had on this show that just, they cannot stop beating the drum of negativity on the college football playoff. I don't know what they want or what they don't want. I just know they love to complain. So, did you have major complaints as you were watching these games, as I know you were? There was something that really just grinded your gears where you just felt depressed about the entire college football postseason structure?
No, I mean, there's things I would fix that I feel strongly. I mean, I thought the field absolutely sucked. I thought the matchups absolutely sucked. Seeding, that's more incompetence and stupidity and valuing things that are really the type of thinking that's held the sport back from actually having great championship situations through the years. But it's not like I looked at it when this is bad for the sport. I think a lot of people, the season drug on too long because it's the longest season we've ever had. We've never, usually, that adjustment from like, okay, New Year's has 10 days later or 9 days later, there's a championship game. And then, let's put college football in the box and miss it for forever. This time you had semis. And then I think not playing it on Saturdays too. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Despite the rating being good, but that's still a good point because so many people love watching it on Saturdays. And
I'm with you.
You got Thursday and Friday night, and the Monday night thing has been the Monday night championship game has been a thing for a while, but I guess ratings were down 12% year over year with the championship game, but up 28% from that Georgia TCU game. So, I mean, there was a lot.
7, you're going to lose people.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on that day. It was a holiday.
Right.
People were off work. I think maybe for a night game works against you. If it were during the day on Martin Luther King Day, then people maybe because that everybody's off that day. Plus, it was inauguration day, so you had a lot of people paying attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said something about, it's 2 Midwestern teams. That's That's why Notre Dame's a national brand. I mean, there are somebody go take a poll in New York City who people before. You ever heard of like the Subway alums? That's New York's full of Notre Dame fans. It's not, especially major cities in the north. A lot of Notre Dame. It's not like, oh, that nobody even. Some people don't even know it's in Indiana. I mean, some people don't even realize that. So that's not it. I mean, Notre Dame's the biggest brand out there. Going to draw ratings. I just think where it fell on the calendar was a little bit, and you mentioned all the heels of the NFL playoffs and stuff. Some people get footballed out, by that time. Yeah. So, maybe those are all things to tweet, but I thought the playoff was fine. Does it need work? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I am much more in favor of tweaking it and improving what we have, going back to the days of, 1 versus 2. No other sport really does that, Mike. High school, and no other level of football does that. Mm-hmm. The NFL doesn't do it. High schools don't do it. I mean, junior high, sometimes they have a playoff and just go with the regular season. But, if they did a postseason, they wouldn't vote on the top 2 and go from there. I mean,
Division 2, Division 3, FCS.
And I have a soft spot for the traditionalists because I am one of myself. But one thing I've learned through years, you're not going to stop progress.
Right.
And if you care about these things, instead of continuously holding on to, I want to go back in time, how can you keep the elements and what made it special and what mattered? Those elements can carry through a period of change. I did about the bowl draft, by the way, guess what? They interviewed the director of bowl season. We had him on another show. His name escapes me. And sure enough, the quote there is, hey, we're in favor of doing away with these stupid conference tie-ins that have been there for 30 years and just letting them select the best teams and providing the best matchups. And that's something we've talked about here. I think we're in both agreement of 16-team playoffs, probably where they need to go. I want to start a stupid list because I think it's stupid that the other conferences besides the SEC and Big Ten are fighting this. And it hit me as to why they don't want more of those teams from the Big Ten and SEC to make it. They're just happy with the crap they had this year, right? Because it doesn't mean, it means that your champion or whoever probably doesn't have to play Ole Miss in the first round, right? Because you get beat. They don't want to get beat. So that's, and there's money, so I looking at it, I'm with you. I don't understand beating it up. It's gonna be a fact of life. They're not going back. And so the question now becomes, how do we protect the values of the sport and what made it special, while at the same time advancing the playoff and tweaking it to where it can be even better than it was this year?
Yeah. And I'm just going to double down on what I think was great about this season, because it's not just the playoff. The benefit of this can be seen in the month of November. Programs like South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama, Miami, they were all playing relevant games in November with at least a chance. Now, they all came up short of the mark, but they all had a legitimate chance. All those fan bases could sit there and tune in and go, we're not just playing for the Gasparilla Bowl. We're actually playing for a chance at the national championship. That is invaluable. That is absolutely so. Everybody will be fixated. The never expansion people will be fixated and obsessed with every milk and cranny that was wrong in their mind with the playoff. And they will not talk about what it did to help the regular season, to have more people have relevant games in November. That's easy to forget now because we're in late January, but I don't forget it. I think it was great. I think it's a great element of it all, and I still think the regular season is very important, if not more important.
Hey, yeah, guess what? You're right. Guess who else? I mean, the Kansas Jayhawks were relevant for 3 weeks because those jokers kept knocking everybody out. They knocked off BYU. They knocked off Iowa State. They knocked off Colorado. I mean, the Jayhawks, I mean, they were left for dead at 1-6. Unfortunately, They lost to Baylor the last week of the season, didn't even make a bowl. But man, they caused a lot of chaos. You mentioned Ole Miss, South Carolina. There was talk about the service academies possibly making it this year.
Yeah.
I mean, when have we ever thought about that? Normally they just go to whatever bowl and that's that. But I think it actually makes the regular season better because with the 4-team format, that negatively impacted the regular season to me because that meant, sometimes your late season conference games between two good teams, yeah, the fan bases care about it. It's a relevant game, but there's just not a lot of, what does it mean on a national scale? And the media talked playoff to death, and the focus was so narrow because under that system, you really couldn't have two losses most of the time. Under that system, it was based on your pretty record because there's no other way to do it when you only have 4. And you're basically saying the top 4 conference champs, if their record is pretty. With a 12-team playoff, tentacles reach to other fan bases, even those like Kansas, like I said, that they've been out of the playoff, but they're knocking 3 teams down the list, and knocking them out, and that's good. There's a cartoon with the Jayhawk, which is kind of a little cartoony. The Jayhawk, the Kansas Jayhawk mascot logo. So he's sitting there grinning like Toucan Sam, and he goes and Death is there, with the sickle. And it's like, did I have a winning team? And Death's like, no, but you caused a lot of hell. And the Jayhawk, I don't know, it's a cute cartoon. But yeah, so even that, they're relevant, and they probably wouldn't have been because all the teams they beat already had losses and wouldn't have factored into the 4 teams. So, beyond, the obvious, like in SMU, Boise State fan bases are probably pretty fired up about the format. Arizona State, that sleeping giant of a fan base. So I think it's overwhelmingly positive. I just think the system needs to be tweaked. And there needs to be some comments used as far as who gets in, how they're seated, maybe some changes with the calendar and where they're played. College football in general, with all the changes, there's a lot of sensitivity with the calendar right now. They're trying to move the portal window to January. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's because of the academic calendar. We do semesters in college, and it's just hard. Football's always been a 1-semester sport, so it's hard to do that. So we'll see what happens.
Just to put a bow on the season as a whole, and look, give the Big Ten its props now. That's 2 straight years that the Big Ten has won a national championship. It's 2 straight years the SEC has not been involved in the national championship game after completely dominating the sport for about a 20-year span. So I don't think the Big Ten will ever be as deep as the SEC, but there's no question there are some juggernauts in the Big Ten, and they got all the financial resources that the SEC does, and they've got the support and the NIL money and everything else that's going on with the sport. Quick story, and then I want to I know JC's having a little bit of internet issues. I want to get your thoughts on what you just brought up, and that is the new calendar, the new wave of the collective, the new wave of revenue sharing. Things we're going to be talking about throughout this off season here on the show. But my wife has a really good friend, and her and her husband are huge Ohio State fans, and they live in northern Kentucky, which was right on the border of Ohio. And I don't know much about their financial situation. They both work at a casino. Okay. You can probably do pretty well in tips if you're working a blackjack table or what have you. But one of the other concerns, and I'm definitely sympathetic to this, and I know fans of a lot of these teams that could not afford to go to all the games if their team made a deep run. I understand that. Unfortunately, you just have to be selective, and everybody's got their own budget. And look, some people can't afford to go to a damn regular season game. People are getting priced out. That's just, unfortunately, that's the nature of the business. But these guys went to the home game against Tennessee, got in their car, drove from northern Kentucky to Dallas to watch that playoff game, got in their car and drove to Atlanta to watch that playoff game, the national championship game. I don't know. I've been asking, like, can we get a dollar figure on how much because the tickets I know alone for the national championship game, I think were $1,200 a pop, right?
To get in.
Yeah. Now I don't know where their
Good.
seats were, but I hope they weren't nosebleed for $1,200 a pop. But this just in, Notre Dame alums have a lot of money. So
yeah, and then it was still Ohio State's got a huge fan base, and it still looked like a Christmas tree because Notre Dame fans wore green, and so it was the scarlet and the green, like Christmas. I've sat in the nosebleeds at Mercedes-Benz for Bama, Georgia. Best game I've ever seen.
I was
not
there.
Bad. I mean, they're not bad seats, really. I've got some.
No. It's a really well set up.
There's not a terrible seat in the house, really, if you think about it. But that's another thing about fan cost. I mean, and all these major bowl. That's another thing about it. I think some reality needs to come to the Orange and Fiesta and these folks too. It was almost surreal that you're sitting there in a press conference for the semis, right? And it's all about the bowl organizers. It's just like a normal bowl, and it's not really. That's a lot, especially for fans. If you're a bowl, you almost would rather have the quarterfinal matchup because bowls and it's all about the experience and the week and all that, and it's hard to turn around twice. That could be a tweak as well. With what they do,
I think home games are the best games, right?
Home games are fine. I would also say this. I would say semis forward, just do the championship game. Let cities bids if you have to play it on a neutral site. Still going to cost money for fans to travel.
Yeah.
But maybe who knows? I don't think there's any more. And this whole thing too. And I was like, why are the little conferences, the little guys, complaining about wanting to keep this stupid conference champion gets a bye seating system? I was like, I don't know what planet.
Well, that's not going to hold.
They're living on.
They're living.
Here's why though. I mean, at least for next year, because they get paid. You get $8 million for being in the quarters,
correct,
or something like that, something stupid like that.
Right.
But you don't get that much if you're just in the first round,
right?
Especially for a visiting team. So. Payout, the payouts equal because the playoff takes the tickets with the home games, but then the home team makes the concessions and all that other stuff. So, yeah, so that's why they want the money.
They want the money.
Wow.
There's no question. Notre Dame doesn't share a penny of any of that. That's why you folks that are still living that pipe dream that Notre Dame is joining a conference, it's not happening. Doesn't matter how many times you hear rumors. They're not going to the ACC. They're not going to the SEC. They're not going to the Big Ten. They've got the best setup in college football. They don't have to share anything. They make their own schedule. They're sitting pretty, and they know it. And it's not going. They're not going to do that. So Notre Dame has that privilege. They are unique. Do I like it? No. That's why I don't pull for Notre Dame. I have nothing against Notre Dame personally. I have a very good friend who's an alum, and they're good people. Just like the people, the Winslows, who traveled all over to see their Buckeyes and are probably dreading that Amex bill when it comes in the mail, and they realize how many thousands of dollars they spent. But you know what? Knowing them, they're not going to care because they got to see their Buckeyes win a national championship. And that's what it's all about. It is JC and Morgan. We are presented by MG&A Wealth, mgawealth.com. As for Sean, he will take great care of your financial needs. Also, Nest and Wild Mattress for the most comfortable mattress on the planet, nestandwild.com. And Palm Casual Furniture. Those of you in the states of Florida, South Carolina, you will not get more comfortable patio furniture than Palm Casual. Several locations throughout the Southeast. Check them out as well. Final segment, JC, as we continue this rock block commercial free.
Rock block. Block a block.
Your thoughts. I need you to help me understand where we're headed, because this is the cynic in me. We all know, as I like to say, every athletic director of these major schools, major conference schools, just got handed a $21 million revenue sharing invoice. Most of that will go to football. Some of that will go to men's basketball. The rest will go elsewhere. The last administration politically tried to do some Title IX thing at the last second that would have really put that on its ear, and like half of it would have gone to women's athletic. That's not going through. So it's going to be what you expect it to be, where the revenue sports get most of the revenue. Kind of common sense capitalism that this country was basically founded on. But what I don't understand, and I've heard you mention this a few times, which is the day and age of just giving, if you ever watch The Sopranos, what the mafia would do, they call it no-show jobs, no-show construction jobs, where you get paid. You get paid to go and build a roof and do this job on a construction site. But what you do is you actually sit in a lawn chair, drink beer, and do nothing and get paid. That's a no-show job. We have been doing no-show jobs in NIL since it started. This is artificial demand in many cases. We are not the companies that spend the money that they're spending, or the boosters vis-a-vis a company that they own. They're not getting that type of return on the investment, but they don't care. They're fans. They want, in their eyes, it's money well spent because they're paying for success and that makes them happy. And who's to say that they shouldn't be able to do that, so on and so forth. So that's what's been going on. But you have pointed out a number of times that's not going to be tolerated anymore with this new agreement. You actually have to prove legitimate doing something for the NIL. So the $21 million, that's everybody has that to play with, and that's legit money, revenue sharing, just like you would have in the NFL or anywhere. That's the TV money, which, by the way, will escalate year by year by year. And just like in the NFL, the next TV contract will be more money, which means that will be more. So 21 could be $30 million come the next TV deal in 2026. So my question to you, JC, is go over for everybody out there, and this is how we're going to close shop, and we're going to talk more about this in the offseason, the new calendar and the new way athletes are compensated and what the new NIL collectives actually look like in a day and age where they're supposed to be, let's just say, a little more legit.
All of this has to sustain legal challenges, even including the Title IX. There's a lawyer based in Oregon. I think he's Mr. Title IX, and he's already saber rattling, so to speak. In his case, if you want to read the guidance from the previous administration, Mike, it states a lot. It says the word opportunity over and over again. They're trying to say that, name, image, and likeness deals that are facilitated by the school, which a lot of schools can do per their state law now, they have to be equal. They're interpreting the revenue share money as financial assistance to go to school. To me, assistance is a lot different than earning. Okay, like rev share is not financial assistance. It's like a sales commission almost. And then NIL, with how it's supposed to be, will be just legit NIL. You pay them for player appearances, signed items, signing sessions, business commercials. It's legit. It's all legit, allegedly. And it's going through a clearinghouse that's professional, not the NCAA or the federal government or any of the dysfunctional organizations that take forever, the DMV. The schools are forking out big cash to have this clearinghouse, anything over $600. Now, what's going to happen is there's going to be a deal that some smart genius out there that doesn't care about the game is going to try to make and pay a guy $1 million for a couple of tweets or something and claim that market value because that's what he's willing to pay. Okay. And so then they're going to get sued. And there's going to be injunctions, and this isn't right, and an injunction against the settlement, and the House settlement, which is what's guiding all this, could fall apart. Along with the dude, the clueless Title IX guy, the Title IX zealot, I'll call him that, attorney out in Oregon that's already got a lawsuit prepared, ready to go over rev share. And those things will have to make their way through the courts. That's the caveat here. If the House settlement becomes the law of the land, which I don't know that Congress, if everybody gets sue happy again in the title, I don't know that Congress now and President Trump won't pass a law. I've been very skeptical. It really had nothing to do with Joe Biden being in office, but there was so much going on. I've been very skeptical that the right people weren't pushing it. Like Ted Cruz isn't going to be able to get something through a Democratic Senate, no matter what. Now, and he seems to be the one with the most common sense. I think he could. So maybe there's a law. But the House settlement, if it stays as it is and just use common sense and shoot it down and say, no, this was agreed to, then July 1st, that's when the rev share kicks in. There's some feeling out there at most schools, many schools, and which is why the portal prices were ridiculous this year, that or collect money, you have just spend it before July 1st and you're good. I don't know if that's going to hold as far as the rules of the sport, because the President Moorhead from Georgia was on the record saying absolutely not. You got it. This is not, you're not going to pay a bunch of guys now and then, and float everything. Who knows what comes of that? But in that case, most football programs are going to have 15 million to spend. Basketball will have around 3 or 4, and then you'll have the rest of your sports, depending on what you want to emphasize with rev share. The collectives are going to have to become, because the issue is no booster money. Like, you can't have a booster write a check for $500,000 to a collective for nothing and give them the money and then have them give it to the players. Even the rev share money can't come from boosters. It has to come from TV revenue, jersey sales, anything the player touch that generates money. It can come from that. But a booster can't write you $20 million check to cover your rev share. They can cover something else, and you can move those funds over, no question. But it's easy way to be creative. So the collectives, whereas like 20 million, 15, 20 million was what collectives really needed to have when it was just them annually. That number is going to about 3 to 7 above board at most places to kind of get that extra, I don't want to say advantage, but if you're limited with rev share, and you can kick a deal to a guy and make it all even, kick a deal to a guy, I think,
So just I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to, because there's a lot to digest for a simple man like me. So we are now with that 3 to 7 and the 21. The major programs will be in the ballpark between 25 and 30 in terms of salary on football. Or I know some of that will go to basketball, so maybe closer to 25.
I think no. You can't really spend much more than Ohio State did, and even was an outlier because all the players they had to retain. I think football will probably be at most places around 19 to 20, and that's in a few years once the collectives, because most of the collectives now, you can't do booster money. They got to figure out how to generate between 3 and 7. So that number is going to obviously be at 3. And then some places did away with their collectives. So it's all going to be outside endorsement deals if they're going to compete. Texas Tech did that, and another school just brought their collective in-house. And And so I think you're looking. I think 20 is about as high as we're going to get until the revenue, like you mentioned, with the revenue going. There's going to be. I mean, Stuart Mandel or somebody mentioned that some schools have gone over that, and I just don't.
Here's what people are thinking. If I'm the University of Texas and I've got more money than God, I can't go ahead. Here's an extra $10 million in the collective so that we have the highest payroll in America, and it's not even close. That they cannot do that, or can they do that?
Well, they have to. If your collective is generating that much money, it's going to be on the collective to figure out how to do it to get it so where it's above board. I don't want to say it's money laundering, but no, I don't want to. I don't know about money laundering, but it's you have to find legit marketing opportunities to pay fair market value to make. In other words, if you have a bunch of members, because membership dues are not booster money, right? You're generating $1 million a year in members. That's the point of the collective. And you're forking out some of that on benefits for members, right? A couple $100,000 a year or whatever. Well, then you got this pile of money. And so the collective, instead of just saying, here's your contract and do a couple tweets or whatever, you're like, all right, well, we got these 6 events. We can pay you market value for every one of them. And this contract, and you're going to do this, and then we're going to pay you for these tweets, and we're going to evaluate that. It's just going to be another couple of steps. And with and on the other side of it, with memberships, you're not going to be able to sit there and say, well, this guy's paying 25 G's a year for a membership. Nah, you're not ever going to get there.
So Sammy Sugar Daddy at school XYZ is not going to be able to completely tilt the scale toward a couple of programs that clearly have more financial resources from boosters than others.
Yes. No, in theory, yeah. It won't be as crazy. Of course, the schools that there are schools that spend more than Ohio State in the collective era. They're located in Texas. Most of them, and it hadn't turned out too well for the schools that are like egregiously spending. People think Alabama and Georgia have all this NIL money. They don't. I know that for a fact. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think Michigan was spending through the nose to build the Harbaugh with. Washington certainly wouldn't. So it has nothing to do with winning. But yeah, that's really the gist of what they want to prevent. Is the big money guys just funding the whole thing. But again, because there's a cap on rev share, you're saying I can write a check for $20 million to the athletic department and they don't have to pitch pennies on anything because they just move the $20 million in TV to rev share and they're fine and they don't miss a beat. But that's largely your more traditional where they're building buildings and paying coaches salaries, things like that. Nothing's keeping the boosters from joining the collective at the highest level, but it's got to make sense. Like I said, there's no $8,000 a month membership or anything like that. I mean, you're talking.
Last question on this. Okay, because I know we're running on time. I know you've got to get to another show here on the Marvelous Chief Sports Network. If they violate what you're talking about, the kind of the new cracking down on things, it's not quite the Wild Wild West anymore, right? This is a little more structured, if I'm understanding you correctly. If somebody's guilty, because there's always going to be somebody trying to find loopholes. Who's the infractions? I mean, the NCAA seems feckless at this point. Like who's going to crack down on it?
Federal courts.
Uh-huh.
It's a federal lawsuit. They could get fined, sued. And then based on that, see what you have there, Mike, if it gets back in front of federal court because it's been violated, then you have discovery and subpoena power. The NCAA had no subpoena power.
This is not Barney Fife trying to crack down from Indianapolis. This is the actual federal government.
Yeah, you get the goods, and then you just hand it to the NCAA, and they have an abundance of proof, and then they can put you on probation or whatever. So it's not in anybody's interest to look. There's going to be ways to work around it. You know, boosters and fans are still going to be able to put their programs in competitive situations, but it's just not all dependent on that anymore. You know, and it's not limitless either. So there you go.
All right, last question. How much more portal activity do you expect to see this offseason?
Well, there's another period coming up. They're trying to do away with it for next year, but there's another period, week-long period coming up. We could see some movement. There's always one or two really good players that get in at that point. Heck, maybe there ends up being more freshmen that get discouraged at their school, and you know they don't like being there. They go through spring and they leave, that kind of thing. But as far as people leaving Ohio State or Notre Dame, right now there's not expected to be anybody significant. I mean, they both had a handful of players get in the portal after the season was over, but it looks like it's pretty much calmed down. We'll talk about this more next episode, but Nebraska, Auburn, LSU, I thought all had really good portal classes. Missouri all had really good portal classes this year. And I'm not basing that on the rankings, just kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, and those are 4 programs that, quite frankly, needed it, right? If they're going to go next level. Some need it more than others. Some dominate recruiting and don't need the portal as much, like a Georgia, et cetera, et cetera. All right, that's a lot to digest. The great thing is we're going to have the whole offseason to digest it. If you're a fan of this show, you know in the offseason we're able to have a lot more guests on that'll shed light on a number of things. We have a little bit more fun. We'll bring back some Fiver Dimer. We don't have time to do that today, but we'll get rocking with that. I actually love this show of the offseason. We get to spread our creative wings a little bit more,
as
it turns out. And the JC5 will be back as well. So we hope you've enjoyed our commercial-free installment of JC and Morgan presented by MGA Wealth, MGAwealth.com. For the normal producer of this show, Phil Molinax, he still got us on the air. And for all you tuning in, we say thank you. For JC, this is Mike saying so long. We'll see you next week on JC and Morgan.